3 Ukrainian drones were streaking through Russian airspace when suddenly, the entire control system plunged into darkness. No GPS signals, no satellite support. Only blank screens remained, and an invisible enemy was jamming the entire system, disrupting all connections. What unfolded next was like something straight out of a high-stakes action thriller, where technology and strategy clashed head-on. 6 drones had penetrated deep into Russian territory, heading straight for a critical target, a train carrying fuel and possibly military equipment, enough to sustain Russian forces in occupied Ukrainian regions. These drones weren't expected to survive long against Russia's dense defenses. With advanced radar systems and powerful electronic warfare capabilities, this setup had scrambled their navigation, seized control of their signals, and fogged their sensors, turning the airspace into a deadly maze. Yet, these weren't commercial drones that would crash upon losing connection. They were Ukraine's UJ-26 Beaver, a kamikaze attack drone model, equipped with a secret advantage the Russians hadn't anticipated: anti-jamming capabilities and low-altitude flight to exploit terrain. To approach the train, the opening move was to take down the eyes of Russian air defenses. Specifically, knocking out a single traction substation that powered the regional radar and anti-aircraft network. Miss the target, and the entire squadron would become easy prey for missiles and anti-aircraft guns. But succeed, and a few precious minutes of chaos would open up, enough for the remaining drones to complete their mission. Standing between them and the substation was Russia's sophisticated electronic warfare system, designed to hijack drones mid-flight by broadcasting spoof signals. Russian officers sat before their screens, watching intently as the system sent fake commands forcing the drones to turn back or make an emergency landing, confident they would soon comply and fall into the trap. But that never happened. The drone's control signals frequency hopped continuously, vanishing before radar could lock on, rendering the takeover attempts futile. This technology isn't new. It originated in World War II thanks to the invention by actress Hedy Lamarr. But when applied correctly in the modern warfare environment, it draws a clear line between capture and escape from control, allowing the drones to maintain their course without interference. Meanwhile, half the formation had split off and vanished from radar sweeps, creating a strategic surprise. The southern group hugged river valleys and rugged terrain, accepting a longer detour, potentially adding dozens of kilometers, in exchange for staying below the radar horizon, where signals were obscured by the Earth's curvature. Ukrainian intelligence had meticulously mapped border radar stations, identifying narrow corridors created by the landscape, where radar waves were blocked by hills, mountains, and rivers. Flying these corridors was like threading a needle at high speed. Veer slightly left, and the S-300 radar would pick up the signal and activate long-range missiles. Tilt right, and the Mobile Torm 2 would immediately sweep and fire. The pilots had to maintain absolute altitude, as exceeding the 150-foot threshold would light them up on screens from the border all the way to Moscow, triggering a full alert. The split formation tactic was proving effective, creating a diversion that dispersed enemy forces. On their displays, Russian radars detected the northern group near a major highway, promptly scrambling Panzer units to intercept at high speed. They had no idea that 3 others were silently crossing river routes, exploiting the Earth's curvature to hide from radar view. At low altitude, radars could only see to the horizon, about 20 to 30 kilometers depending on terrain, and the planet itself became a natural shield, concealing thermal and electromagnetic signatures. Russian commanders were thrust into a tough spot. Committing all forces north would leave the south exposed, but splitting them risked breakthroughs on both fronts, leading to a comprehensive vulnerability. They had only seconds to choose, as the clock ticked relentlessly. As they neared the Orlovsky area, tactics had to adapt to the expansive terrain. The Dvoyne attraction substation sat exposed on open ground, where any approaching object would be vulnerable for over half a kilometer, making it an easy target for anti-aircraft guns and missiles. Ukrainian strategists spotted a potential weakness. Nearby structures, like telecom towers or civilian infrastructure, could create an electromagnetic shadow, where radar signals were jammed or obscured. If exploited properly, this would open a corridor straight to Salsk and the train, bypassing the main defense layers. However, this intelligence carried high risk. If the Russians had repositioned mobile radars or ramped up patrols, the entire swarm would fly right into a deadly trap. The lead pilot gripped the controls tightly upon entering the presumed safe zone, and only upon diving in could they confirm its existence, relying entirely on potentially outdated intel data. In the final stretch, Zu-23 gunners needed just seconds to open fire, but those seconds stretched like eternity when streams of bullets zeroed in on you at rates of thousands of rounds per minute. One drone had to charge ahead, sacrificing itself to clear the path and test the ground. At least 3 survivors were needed, 1 to destroy the substation, creating regional grid chaos, and 2 to finish the ultimate task at Salsk, where the primary target awaited. At 2:26 a.m., the northern group approached the Dvoynaya substation after traversing dozens of kilometers of hostile airspace. They had employed radar gate threading technique, exploiting blind spots created by hills, mountains, and terrain to slip through the sweeps. Blind spot maps were prepared in advance, and the drones popped up over ridgelines for split seconds, just enough to orient via cameras and sensors, but not long enough to be identified and classified as targets, before dropping back down, repeating continuously. It was a game of peekaboo with radar the entire way, demanding high precision to avoid detection. 2 Zu-23 gun nests had been hastily set up to guard the critical substation, with crews fully alert after the alarm. The Zu-23 was an old Soviet cannon but still deadly. Twin 23mm barrels spitting thousands of rounds per minute, capable of downing slow-flying drones if locked on via optical sights. But without radar assistance, gunners had to aim manually, no different from shooting birds in a storm, where wind and rain blurred visibility. Through the lead beaver's thermal camera, the target appeared crystal clear. A massive substation powering the entire region, including the Panzer at Salsk and other air defense systems. The 3 beavers formed a pincer V-shape from over a kilometer out, spreading out to disperse fire. The lead one climbed high, acting as bait to draw attention. The Zu-23s immediately swiveled skyward, weaving a deadly dome of tracers slicing through the night. Meanwhile, the other 2 hugged the deck from opposite sides, using terrain for cover. The second emerged right at the fence, too close for the guns to depress in time. It slipped through and hid behind a maintenance building, evading the initial barrage. The lead barrel rolled through the fire, exploiting familiar Russian firing patterns, always leading targets by a fixed amount, to fake out with a sudden direction change. In the chaos, the third threaded through high-voltage lines, defenders hesitating for fear of hitting infrastructure and causing greater damage. Touch those wires and the drone would vaporize in an electrical arc. Clearing the obstacles, all 3 converged on the substation from different angles. The first strike tore through the cooling system, a shaped charge erupting in flames, triggering a secondary blast as oil met hot metal. 2 seconds later, the overhead dive pierced the insulators, disrupting high-voltage flow. The final hit smashed the control cabinet, blocking any isolation or recovery. 3 attack vectors, no escape, leading to a cascading reaction. Chaos spread immediately as voltages arced wildly, relays failing in chain, plunging the area into darkness with fireballs rising. Bases fired up backup generators, but they required warm-up time and stable power, causing radar screens to flicker and air defense systems to degrade. Meanwhile, the surviving drones throttled up toward the train, capitalizing on the newly created gap. At 2:33 a.m., the Panzer S-1 crew at Salsk saw their systems collapse entirely. The surge from Orlovsky had swept away early warning radars and command centers, severing target data feeds. The Panzer ran on internal power, but isolated without the network. Response time shrank to seconds instead of minutes for planning. The remaining UJ-20 closed in from the south, shadowing rail lines in the storm to leverage infrastructure clutter. This noise made radars dismiss them as maintenance signals or civilian vehicles. At precise altitudes below the P-18 radar's main beam, they remained invisible until the final moments, avoiding early detection. This timing was precalculated based on intelligence. Panzer shifts changed at 2:30 with handover clutter in the command vehicle. The drone struck during peak disarray, boosting penetration odds. Without GPS, pilots relied on river bends, road segments, and landmarks for course keeping, using infrared cameras for real-time adjustments. Track lights were out cold, possibly from widespread blackout or a Russian trap. The Panzer gunner strained at the blurry screen, sifting real from rain noise. The system slewed sluggishly, lacking radar support, no different from blind firing by instinct, like a World War II gunner with modern weapons but subpar sensors. A heat streak appeared in the woods. Too steady for birds, too hot for ground noise. The turret lumbered over, computers lagging on poor quality optical data. The first fire command failed due to low voltage from the spreading blackout. After emergency override and bypassing safeties, a 57 times 10 to the power of 6 missile launched, but without continuous guidance. The radio link dropped after a few hundred meters from interference. The missile veered off target, sailing harmlessly past the drone. The drone scattered instantly like fish evading a shark. One dove low to minimize profile, one climbed high to distract, one held straight to bait. The gunner had to choose and chose wrong, fixating on the most prominent. The primary slipped through, vanishing behind a warehouse. $1 million weaponry turned into useless fireworks. Voltage kept dropping, rendering the system powerless. Unable to reload in time, the drones regrouped just hundreds of meters from the station. 3 attack vectors, synced via internal clocks to avoid broadcasting positions. In 2 seconds, all charged in, overwhelming any remaining defenses. On dim screens, Russian troops could only watch shadows inbound, helpless to stop due to blackout and confusion. At 2:41 a.m., the 3 survivors swarmed Salsk station from all sides. Thermal cameras revealed a scene beyond expectations. A fuel train dozens of cars long, loaded with thousands of liters of diesel and possibly military cargo, making it an ideal target. The 3 drones dove with precision, staggered altitudes forcing opponents to readjust constantly, slowing responses and heightening success chances. The locomotive glowed bright on infrared, fuel cars showing uniform heat. The first drone slammed into the engine, destroying the diesel compartment with a shaped charge, stranding the train in place, unable to move. 6 seconds later, the second pierced an upwind fuel car, turning the spill into a spreading fire lake under the wheels, igniting upon hitting hot metal. The third targeted mid-train, right on the sensitive cargo car per intel. The initial blast sparked a chain reaction, and as diesel flames licked over, the entire train became a massive inferno, with fire spreading to adjacent cars and surrounding infrastructure. 3 strikes, 1 unstoppable destruction chain, causing massive fires and rail traffic disruptions. Russia's defense ministry claimed to have downed 74 drones that night, but civilian videos exposed the truth, showing raging fires and black smoke engulfing the area. The governor's downplaying statement of just 2 fuel cars and 1 locomotive damaged became a joke when mile-wide smoke plumes rose, visible from space, accompanied by 1 civilian death and extensive other damages. End of story.